Welcome to the Eclectic Leadership Podcast. And today we have got Aiko Sato with us. And I'm very excited that Aiko has very kindly accepted to speak with us today and share her pearls of wisdom on everything and anything about leadership. Very warm welcome to you, Aiko. How have you been?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm good. I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited. Hopefully I can contribute to your body of work and just share a little bit about my thoughts.
Sure. Well, that's fantastic. And look, if I start to introduce you, I will not do justice to what you have done, the kind of work that you're doing. I'm aware of it, and I don't want to steal that thunder away. So, why don't you, in your own words, please tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, where you're coming from, and then we'll get rolling.
Well, I don't know if I can live up to the warm glow you've just given me, but thanks. I mean, yeah, I'm Aiko. I'm Japanese American, first generation American. So my parents came over to the States from Japan, and then I was born in the States, and now I live in England. So, bit of a global citizen now, I kind of feel like. And that really shaped a lot of, I think, my interests. But I started my career in education. I worked a lot with elementary school students, ended up really loving how, this idea of how to be the best educator I can be, and then how to help other educators be the best educators they can be. That made my interest in coaching become really evident, working with adults as well. So I've kind of had like a wiggly career in that sense. Got really fascinated with how to help people help other people. And then I got into instructional design for a hot minute. And now I work with a lot of leadership coaches in that same kind of vein. Um, Now I'm the head of solutions for a small leadership consultancy. So I get to work with a lot of organizations who are basically having that same question, like, what is the best way that we can help people thrive? And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I don't really believe that there's a single like career line. So I don't know where that'll take me, in the next like 10, 20 years. But I think I'll just continue to follow that thread of like, how do I help people?
Amazing. And I mean, upfront, you said something that helping people help people. So that's kind of stuck in my mind immediately that you're not directly helping people. Of course, that's your intention, but you're helping people help people. And of course, you're in the coaching space for that in that
Mhm.
small consultancy. How do you define leadership? In the end of the day, I think what you're trying to do possibly is make better leaders. What is it in your own words? How do you define it?
I think that definition has changed for me over the course of my life. But right now, I've really landed on this idea of like impact and influence. I think a strong leader is able to have a strong impact and has strong influence. It used to be a lot about like I thought I would put leaders up on a pedestal, like that's someone I want to become or that's someone I want to follow. But I think there's also a lot of quiet leaders and people who you don't realize the scope of their leadership in your life until later. And so then I started to think about, well, that's impact, right? Like it's about the outcome that they had in your life. So I think that's kind of how I'm defining leadership today.
So impact and influence. These are the two words that you think that define leadership.
Yes.
In your own experience, do you get inspired by anybody like that who had, in your view, a lot of impact either to the world, to their company, or to you personally, or had a lot of influence that you, I think, can draw from?
I've had, yeah, I've been really fortunate, I think, to have a lot of people in my life that I consider to be really strong leaders. But also, I think, interestingly enough, I've also had a lot of people who've shaped my leadership style who I thought their leadership I didn't like. And that I think that's also important because it made me think about the way it made me feel. And that's also impact, the way that a leader makes you feel. And I needed to have that full spectrum. So I've had managers, for example, who really made me feel quite crummy. And I was like, that is also impact and influence. It really influenced me to think about, okay, that person holds a lot of power in my life, and a lot of influence, and that means something. So that was a good nugget to have. But I think really strong leaders in my life for me have been teachers. And I think that's why I was interested in education at the beginning. I mean, teachers have a really unique sense of, they're the first type of leaders, I think, like true leaders, someone has exposure to because they have power over you. They hold information for you. They are access to information. They're access to progression. They're your access to your first sense of society and culture. And so I think like they hold a lot of these leadership roles that you're gonna like I guess, experience in the rest of your life. But anyways, so yeah, I think I've had a lot of really good leaders in my life, good teachers that have shaped things. My favorite was my photography teacher in high school and middle school. His name is Mr. Gottschall. And at first, he was a typical teacher. He taught me how to love photography. He taught me how to use the dark room. But then as I got older, he shifted his sort of teaching style with me because I was like pretty, I don't know, I wasn't the best student, and I used to skip other classes to come to his class and work in the dark room. And when he realized that I had an interest in that kind of thing, he went from this like typical teacher of like do this, do that, do this, to really asking me questions about why I was interested in certain photography topics, or if I took his brief and I was like, "Can I do this instead?" He'd really question me on it and still critique me on the things I was interested in.
Right.
And yeah, that ability to kind of like meet me where I was at really inspired me and really continued to, or made me want to continue to get better and better at what I was doing. And that really shaped me, I think.
That's, I find it very, I won't say it's surprising, but it's very commonsensical that, do you agree that in our modern times today, the moment we talk about leadership, we immediately associate it with corporates,
Yeah.
business leaders, to an extent, political leaders. But what you're saying is, first of all, leadership itself, if it's a trait, if it's a collection of attributes, it doesn't have to be associated with a certain domain or a function. But even teachers can be big leaders. Teachers can be coaches. Doctors can be leaders. Doctors can be coaches. Even a student who doesn't have a job definitely can be a leader. And, so I think sometimes you assume that, well, yeah, we get it. Leadership is transferable. But many often we immediately talk about, say, coaching for managers. But what about coaching for teachers? What about coaching for doctors? I mean, what you said, the other thing, it really came out was your teacher met you where you were.
Yeah.
That is exactly, it's so important. And in current times, in coaching linguistics, for example, we also talk about the same thing, isn't it? That you meet your client where they are, and so we could have actually have better leaders way earlier in the chain, isn't it? If you focus on the young kids and the youth, we don't have to deal with, of course, we can, it's a non-stop, it's a continuous process. But I really find that the way your teacher must have instilled these values in you very early on and in a very emerging shape, which has actually
Mhm.
had a strong influence on you.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I really agree with that because I think, I mean, nobody lives in isolation, we all live within some sort of community. And that means that inherently you're going to have some sort of influence or some sort of, you know, energy transference, if you will. Like you're going to be involved with somebody. And I think that means that once you're aware of that, you can have a leadership impact on anybody at any situation. So I firmly believe one of the things that I dispel when I think about like leadership coaching is like, well, I'm an individual contributor, so I'm not ready for this yet. But you don't have to manage anybody or be in any sort of like formal level of power
Mm.
over somebody to be a leader. It's all about influence and impact, and you can have that in any sort of shape, and form. So yeah, teachers. I remember when I was working with kids, I would talk about, you can be leaders within your classroom. It doesn't mean you have to be the line leader, but you can be a leader when you're on the carpet by showing how you can sit well, or you can be a leader when you're playing by letting someone else be the tagger. Like little things like that about like
Yeah,
it's all about thinking about how the the effect you have around people. And that can happen, I think, anywhere and anytime.
that's brilliant. And looking around in the world today, or any from your own experience, is there anybody specific, any one figure, either living or not, that really influenced your approach towards leadership?
I think that's a good question. I mean, my teachers a lot, uh, well, okay, this might be kind of a hot take, but I it's a blessing and a curse to be in the leadership space, helping other people become good leaders and then reflecting on your own leadership because it's kind of like you start to think you like know it all,
Mm.
because people come to you for advice. And so actually somebody who's really shaped my idea of leadership was actually my current fiance, because he's not in this space whatsoever. He's in tech. And so sometimes I'll talk to him about like the kind of leader that I want to be. And it's very humbling because he'll be like, Aiko, you're in a bubble. Like the things that you think are obvious for people are not obvious, and he really gives me this new sense of perspective on, when you're a leadership coach or when you're in the people space, you just kind of start to think that is reality because those are all the people that you meet. Those are all the conversations you have. So he sometimes is a really humbling presence to be like, that is a bubble.
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of maybe an unexpected answer. That's what first came to mind. I also really do look at politicians though. I think I mean, I'm American and I really love Pete Buttigieg and the way that he speaks. I think he has a really measured, interesting, fascinating way of talking where it's incredibly accessible. And I think, all the like left wing, right wing stuff aside, um, I really admire his ability to tell a story and the ability to tell really complicated facts in a clear and approachable way. And I think like when I'm talking about a complicated topic or when I want to bring somebody along with a journey that I'm taking, I'm like, okay, that's the kind of way of speaking that I want to have. So those are two super different answers. I hope that's okay. I did not rehearse this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I really like about what you're saying is, I asked you, of course, any one person and all. The common answer could have been a politician or a business person or somebody who is on the media, but you chose
Yeah.
something completely different. And that actually demonstrates the point that sources of leadership inspiration can come from completely non-conventional sources, or possibly those are conventional sources. And we are being framed to look into media personalities or corporate personalities or politicians to look for leadership. And I won't say that many of them are being a good role model anyway. So I really applaud your way of looking at ordinary people around you who are shaping your perspective in an extraordinary way. So that is fantastic. You mentioned about politicians and politics.
Uh-huh.
Again, when we talk about leadership, generally leadership development, we naturally think about business leaders, corporates, companies,
Uh-huh.
managers. Politics and the way of politics, the impact that we have in our life, political leadership. What is your take on that side of leadership? Is it the same leadership traits that we need? Is it different? Where are we with this space?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, it's the same and it's not. Like, obviously there's a level of responsibility and high stakes that those kinds of leaders are responsible for. And I won't pretend that like it's a different, yeah, that it's the same domain as, the kind of leadership I explained like in a classroom. But I think the thing that has to keep it the same as, I guess, that thinking about that level of humanity, you know? I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, a good leader, in my mind, always thinks about the person. And the challenge that politicians have or people at that caliber have is to consider the person, but cement it in a way that is that there's no gray area, you know? And I think that that is probably incredibly challenging. So I think not everybody can be that kind of person, and it must be incredibly lonely and challenging to be in that space. But that is, you know, if they're going to go up there and say that's the responsibility I want to have, then I think that that's something that they need to. Gosh, I'm kind of like stumbling over my words on that one because I'm just like reflecting as I'm thinking about it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we'll come back to that one. Let me marinate on that a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was also reflecting on your own background as well, the way you grew up you're from a Japanese family that's Japanese heritage, born in the US. You are an American citizen now living in England. I think many people will share this kind of a journey of a diverse background, a diverse heritage, irrespective of the more people are, the politicians, the media are trying to divide us. There is a sense of diversity, which ultimately comes to some sort of a confluence. So, from your experience, the way you grew up, the way you look at things, how do you draw these inspirations from your various identity, from your, roots, your family, your political view, where you are, but you live in England now? How do you manage and balance these various sources of roles and layers that you have?
I think really messily is I think the answer. I don't think I've like perfectly nailed it yet. And every new era of my life, I think I have a different relationship with with my different backgrounds. So when I was really young, I struggled with it. And I think a lot of kids can relate to the idea. I think nowadays the kids are really interesting and really cool. But when I was a kid, you know, coming in with my Japanese lunches in the cafeteria, I used to find really embarrassing because people would be like, "What is that? Is that sushi?" And I'm like, "No, it's just the only Japanese food you know." And I used to ask my mom to get me like Lunchables or make me sandwiches. So I wanted to fit in with the other kids. And my mom would because she just wanted me to fit in, you know. And I remember when I got older and I was reflecting on that, how tremendously sad I felt because my mom is getting up at, you know, 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. to make me these handmade lunches, um, f fresh food every single day. And I rejected it because I wanted to fit in with my friends. But she did anyway because that's what she thought would make me happy. But you know, in a small way, I was rejecting my culture. I was saying it's embarrassing to be Japanese. I want to be like everybody else. Um, and I kind of, you know, got a little bit better with that. And then as I got older, my parents used to own like a Japanese video shop. And so movies and TV shows from Japan they would have on DVD and then people could come rent them. You know,
Wow.
this is back in the day. And it was also on VHS. So, you know, maybe that shows my age a little bit. But so it was really interesting because my first foray into the professional world was that, and I was heavily rooted in Japanese culture. You know, all our customers were Japanese. All my media intake was Japanese, and so I was really connected still. That was interesting. Obviously, I went through my teenage turmoils, and once I got into my 20s, I was like, okay, I think I've really figured it out. This idea of this duality of being Japanese and being American. And what's really interesting is that fully shifted when I came to the UK because I was really confident. I was like, I know who I am as a Japanese American. Um, and when I came here, I got to learn so much more about that heritage because I noticed that when people say Asian in the UK, they don't mean East Asian, they
Yeah.
mean South Asian.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really fascinating because when people say, oh, so and so is Asian, I've never felt excluded in that conversation. I was like, that's really interesting. And then when people ask me where I'm from, I never know if people are asking me about my accent or my face.
Right.
And so I kind of go into this full history of where I come from and why I look and sound the way that I do. And I've noticed a lot of people are really, especially because I'm in London and London is really, really diverse.
Yeah.
They're not super interested in the fact that I'm Japanese.
Yeah.
They're really interested in the fact that I'm American. And so I'm kind of having to defend and I'm like, wait, I'm also Japanese, guys. And it's this really interesting idea of like who you are is so different within the context of where you are,
Yeah.
uh, and the way that I represent myself. And it kind of taught me that like, I don't know, who I am is not based on the perception of others.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need to prove all of these different facets that you fully understand all of them. Really what matters is who I am to me. And so I can kind of pick and choose what comes out. And everything I say is informed by all of that. But it's not, but they don't have to know. I don't have to prove it. I don't have to validate it because it just
Yes.
is. And that's kind of where I'm sitting with that at the moment. I think it'll change when I start having kids. I think it'll change when I start caring for my parents as elders, because those are new relationships I'll have with myself. But yeah, it's been fascinating, and I just can't wait to continue to learn more. It's not daunting
Yeah.
anymore. I'm seeing it as a gift.
I mean, there are so many interesting things that you have mentioned. If I could just pick a few out, the fact of seeing somebody with a sushi immediately gives you a nationality. It's I understand. We understand how minds work. Human minds associate very
Yeah.
easily. You're looking for a stereotype. And so that's one thing. Then a sandwich as your enabler to integration, to fit
Yeah.
in. I mean, this is just, and this is, I mean, we're smiling, but this is happening even today. Many, many people are facing it that the moment you are eating with your hands, immediately
Mhm.
there are lots of stereotypes are coming along. And where I'm looking at you, okay, you might be somebody from Asia and you start making assumptions about people. So this whole dilemma between trying to fit in and standing out and integration, I think it's a very big challenge as a leader when you're, of course, navigating your colleagues, your peers. And the last thing that you said was brilliant, that who you are depends on where you are.
Uh-huh.
It also means that you have a lots of roles and identities, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive, isn't it? So that whole fine balancing and being comfortable with all of your identities and not requiring any validation from anybody. So
Mhm.
this is you've just given a fine masterclass on self leadership in 3 minutes. That, how do you navigate all your roles and identities, how everything can coexist at the same time. And more importantly, you are the main validator of your own self, depending
Mhm.
where you are.
Mhm.
That naturally leads us to the question of, diversity and looking at the whole world now. You mentioned about London being a melting pot and the challenge in front of us, or is that a challenge to manage diversity? Is that a requirement from a leadership perspective? Does a good leader, do they need to celebrate diversity, or there is no need? Being homogeneous is just fine. What's your take on that?
This one I'm very, very firm on, which is like absolutely we need to celebrate diversity. We need to be inclusive. And I think the I mean, the biggest, I think, not mistake, but misconception that people have about inclusion in the workplace is that it's a moral imperative. And it is, like, it's the right thing to do. Everyone deserves to thrive and be happy and all that kind of stuff. But it's also just deeply a strategic imperative. Like, it is the smart thing to do. I mean, the incoming generations are more and more diverse, right? In terms of their nationality, their interests, their sexuality. And the reality is the world is diverse. That's just the way things are. And so the question of using all this energy to fight it or using our energy to harness that and then figuring out what it is that we want, how we want to interact with our communities and do that in a way that reflects our communities. I
Mm.
mean, that's just smart. Like, that is just the way that we ought to be responding to things. And so I think, like, people get scared when you think about the right thing to do and this and that because, you don't want to be wrong and you don't want to hurt feelings. And a lot of that is very abstract. And so, of course, you're not going to get it right when you're dealing with the abstract. We can try, but it's a philosophical thing. The whole idea of philosophy is that you just continue to ask questions. And so it's this never ending loop. And that's really scary. But I think that if, focusing on the fact that it is the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do, and the statistics and the data prove it, gives it something to hold on to and think, well, I do want to make the right decision. Is there a right decision? Yes. It
Mhm.
says so here on paper. It makes it a little bit easier to approach. So long story short, that's my soapbox. Yes, good leaders need to be inclusive. Good leaders need to harness diversity. It's just a smart thing to do.
You mentioned about inclusive leadership. What exactly is that? Can you see it? Can you perceive it? How do you exercise inclusivity? I know that it's closely related with diversity, but what is it? Inclusive
I
leadership.
think diversity is what is there, inclusion is what you do with it.
Right.
And then I think people also define belonging as what happens as an outcome. People feel like they belong. So inclusion, I think, is really the act of understanding the diversity and making sure that all of the diverse perspectives and lived experiences are able to thrive, able to be utilized at their fullest capacity. Yeah. Yes. Inclusion is inclusion is the ability for all the diverse perspectives, lived experiences to be at their best capacity. Yeah. I think that's what I'll settle on.
Very interesting. I didn't know that the way you said, so when we said diversity, inclusion, and belonging, what you're saying is diversity is the fact that, or acknowledging, accepting diverse opinions, backgrounds, people. So that's a fact, or that is
Mhm.
something we should embrace. Inclusion or inclusivity is the act of embracing that diversity, making the best of it to their most, capable selves. So that's the act is called inclusion. And then belonging is the last outcome, that they
Yeah.
feel that they're part of something bigger and all. So that's the fact, the act, and the outcome. So that's
Right.
pretty brilliant, actually. I didn't know that. I mean, of course, I've seen these terms many, I mean, everywhere, but I didn't know that this is how you would want to frame it. So
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
Let me close my curtain really quick because I'm
Yeah,
seeing
yeah,
the
yeah.
sunlight coming
No problem.
through. Sorry. I'm being blinded.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So my next question is, there are many non-Western leadership traditions. Currently, what we argue in eclectic leadership movement is that current leadership practices and principles are very westernized, which is, we know why it is, and it's absolutely fine. But many non-Western leadership principles, and that could be from indigenous sources, from religious sources, there's a lot of focus on service, humility, community, you know. Um, what I'm trying to get at is, you mentioned about sushi and all. It seems to me perhaps we have understood and ran the course of a little bit of ikigai, a little bit of kaizen here and there, and we think that we have covered the whole base. That we have
Uh-huh.
understood Japanese leadership is all about Toyota and Honda and their and that is it. And I think,
Yeah.
but you know very well that that's even more than that. So, what is your take on leadership wisdom from, just like your teacher, but from other sources, which is not the mainstream Western sources based on the US, UK, Australia, not the English speaking world, but from other parts of the world? Is there any leadership principle or wisdom which is already in practice or something that has influenced you? What's your take on that?
I love that question because I think you're right. There's kind of this idea of these Japanese ideals,
Yeah.
and they're all there, and I do think it's beautiful. But I think one thing that I really take from Japanese culture and workplace culture And this could, too much of anything is always a little bit tricky. But one thing that's really practiced is this idea of like everything is always in service of the greater community or the greater good or the greater organization. And there's a huge just removal of self. And that I think, again, can sometimes be tricky because we deserve to focus on ourselves. But this idea of just taking your ego out of things and looking at the bigger picture, I think we can all serve to do just a little bit more sometimes. Because when you look at yourself as just a piece of the full puzzle, we can get a little bit more creative what that looks like. And sometimes it really just isn't about you. And that's a hard thing for some people to swallow. We like to think that there's a bigger game at play. And we just have to beat it. And if we can do that, but sometimes we just have to sit back and look at that greater picture. And Japanese people are really, really good at that. We have this, it's another Japanese word, it's gaman. And gaman is like, it's like it's like resilience, it's restraint, it's persistence. You just kind of, this probably sounds really Japanese. We just kind of hold it in. Gaman just means to pause and think and just hold on for a little bit. Again, if you do that too much, that's not good. But sometimes just gaman, like just pause and think and look around a little bit, wait for a little bit of time to pass. And that's really, I think, important. We need to be able to have that idea of just pausing, removing yourself from the situation, thinking about the bigger picture, and then coming in, I think, when we're ready.
It's fascinating. And I really like the word when you said that there's a huge removal of self,
Yeah.
huge removal of self from generally the non-Western leadership principles, but also overall to talk about leadership, we need to make sure that it's not about yourself, it's about the people that you are in service of, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. One of the core principles of coaching is just to be curious, right? Ask questions, really, really focus on your coachee. Be curious, be curious. All your questions that you're asking are open questions so you can get to know more information.
Yeah.
And when I used to train new coaches, people are asking like, "Well, what kind of questions can I ask? What do you have a bank of questions? How do I ask these questions?" And I'm always reminding them to like look and think like, well, many times when we ask that, like, what questions do I ask? How do I know the right questions? It's because you want the coachee to be like, "Ooh, that's a good question." And that's still about you. That's not about them. If you got really curious and just picked apart things because you genuinely want to know more and genuinely want to deep diver, that dive deeper.
Mhm.
So if you genuinely want to dive deeper,
Yeah.
then you start to remove yourself. You just become this blank sheet and you allow the information to flow in. And that's really hard to do. So yeah, I fully think that that is an important skill to have, is to truly just let your ego die a little bit.
Brilliant. And we're nearly coming towards the end of our interview. This has been fascinating. Now, looking ahead, I really like the fact that you so fondly talk about your teachers. So they have a very strong impact on the way you approach leadership in your current work and your current perspectives. And you work with the young people as well.
Uh-huh.
What is that one or two leadership advice that you would give towards the young people who are trying to, become leaders for their own companies, communities, or countries in the future? What would that be?
I think, the one advice for, sorry, these are people who want to be leaders or become
Yes.
better leaders?
Yes. So they're like still young people, say between 15 and 19 or,
Okay,
early
yeah.
20s, still finishing up their studies, but they want to navigate the world, their own emotions and bodies and careers. What
Uh,
is that one or two? What are those one or two things that you would say, this is what you do first?
it would be to stay curious and have zero answers.
Mm,
I think we always want to be done with a certain phase or we want to have an answer. And that's really, really limiting, you know? Like, oh, I finally met this one person and now I think I want to be an HR manager. Or, oh, I met this person and now I think I want to have this career or I want to have this role or I want to make this much money. And that's really, really limiting. And it's natural because we want to stop struggling, right? We want to stop feeling like we're in a free fall. But
Mm,
actually, if you remain curious, that takes you to the next step. Tell me more about that. Or what does that mean? Or how can I do this? We just remain curious. And that is a much more consistent ladder to continue climbing. If you're done, that's done. You plateau. But if you continue to be curious, you're actually going to look behind you and find that you have made a much, much longer strides and a much bigger journey than you thought you were going to if you were looking for caps. Um, and yeah, I think you'll just go higher if you remain curious. I would just say remain curious, stay open, don't look for answers.
mm. Very interesting. I think then if I may add to what you said, that remain curious and don't conclude yet.
Yes, that's a much better way to put
Uh,
it. Yes, don't conclude. I love that.
Right. I mean, yeah, and then you add the yet, the powerful figure that you might want to conclude it at some point, but
Yeah,
carry on. Keep being curious, don't conclude yet. Don't figure out that, okay, by the age of 22, you have figured it out all. You understand how the world works, how God works, religion works. Not really. Keep asking questions. Don't make any assumptions. You carry on, and that's going to be your. So be
yes.
curious. Curiosity is the main thing. Would you say curiosity, being curious, asking curious questions is the one of the top three attributes of a leader at any age, any industry? Would you say that?
1,000%. Yes, 1,000%. Um, yeah, I think it is one of the most important traits that a person can have, period. I think in order to be a strong leader, it's one of the most important traits you can have. Be curious, ask questions. Yeah. I say conclusively, but
Yeah. No, I think it's so important because of not only for young people, but for even for ourselves as professionals. It seemed like a big elephant in the room and everybody's feeling parts of it, or they
yeah,
can see parts of it. Some are talking about resilience, active listening, positive mindset, growth mindset, and all of that. But then sometimes we feel like having a menu of what to focus on first, what to
yeah,
focus on the most. Give me a menu line, give me a roadmap. I understand
yeah,
everything is important. It's like a dish.
yeah,
But you tell me, what should I put, the oil first or should I put the vegetables directly up front? Many people don't even get that. So any kind of a help.
yeah.
And I'm sure the work that you're doing in your you design curriculum for inclusive leadership. You work with young people. So that is exactly what you do. And I think
Uh-huh.
it's fascinating that we all talk about leadership. We want to learn about leadership, but coming back to how do you incorporate it in design,
Mm.
especially in the education system, especially for our young people. And then, of course, the new coaches, the corporates. Designing is, I think, extremely important as well. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate the work that you're doing. Many people can say it, but you're literally designing it. And of course, the
Mm.
coaches and trainers can develop and deliver it later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thanks for saying that. I do think it's important, because a lot of people are like, well, I want to do that, but how?
Yeah,
And I think supporting them on that journey, being a part of that sort of mess and providing any sort of safeguarding that you can provide is a blessing. Because if people want to go on that journey, we should help them.
exactly.
So yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
Fantastic. Aiko, it has been very enlightening. I personally learned a lot. I had a lot of expectations, and you have completely exceeded all of them. The pearls of wisdom that I have taken out from this 40 minutes, it's been really great. And we have to put a lot of these, what you have said, in our next blog articles and everything, with credit to you, definitely. So thank
You're
you very
always
much
so
once again.
flattering. Thank you.
No, I really, really appreciate that. And I think the people who are watching this video will really take a lot of learnings from that, the statements that you have made, the insight that you have shared, your journey, as it's in a fascinating state. And I think there is more to come. So we'll be really happy to have you with us in this Eclectic Leadership podcast very soon in future. And until then, do you have any last comments or anything for the Eclectic Leadership podcast, for ourselves, before we part ways?
Oh, no, I think, stay curious. Don't be afraid to get messy. Do it wrong. Just that continuous movement. There's very little we can't walk back from. So I think just continue to move has worked for me, and I hope works for anyone who is listening, anyone who wants to be in leadership, is to just keep moving, be curious, ask questions. And I mean, thank you so much for being here. I think this is an incredible movement, and it has made me think a lot about my approach, my whys, and my hopes for communities like this. So I really appreciate you bringing me into this and having me be a part of this conversation, because I think dialogue is an incredibly powerful tool that we have for our communities. So I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to do more and can't wait to see how this flourishes.
Thank you very much, Aiko. Thanks a lot again for your time.